Hello, everybody. I walked in frame like a second early or late, so I didn't mean to do a dramatic walk in. I just did one. Whoops. That's all I got for my rambling before the webinar. I'll get straight to the point. I have a feeling between me and you guys, again, I'll ramble a little bit longer, that may not go a full hour. We'll see if people have good questions and we talk through it. But for the most part, feeling pretty good about this. Usually I'm pretty verbose, but I'll try to keep it very, very to the point because I think a lot of what we're talking about today is going to be pretty cut and dry, mostly a discussion of how to establish consistency, which there's not a lot of variance in consistency by the nature of it. So yeah, we'll get started. I'd say 11:01, perfect. Welcome, guys. I'm Ricky Cecchini. I'm the VP of Product here at CloudRadial, and today we are talking about AI at scale, and it's a mix of theory. There's some practice, but this one's really like a culmination of experience that we've seen talking to other vendors, talking to MSPs out in the field that are using AI for consistency, specifically focusing on what it takes to get there and really the science of it and kind of how you should approach it as a whole. Now, it's obviously wrapped up in a sweet old ServiceAI product that we offer and kind of our take on it, which if you've seen it, cool. We're going to see how our some of our tangible features apply to that fact. But as always, a lot of this is framework based. So if you're dabbling, if you're trying to do your own thing, you could probably take a lot of these concepts and kind of use them to enrich your own approach to it. So without further ado, let's talk about what we're talking about. So first things first, we want to cover a few different things. Number one is the consistency problem, which is important. And that's kind of where it all starts and it all trickles down. The idea is that consistency is kind of the thing that sets the tone for everything else. So if you're not consistent or you can't be consistent, which we'll talk about, that's typically what breaks and makes every single step that follows it a lot harder. So first thing we're going to look at is fundamentally how to measure consistency, how to fix it, and then how to improve upon it, iterate on it. So it's really about a framework more so than just like here's feature, next feature, next feature, next feature. And then again, I'll switch over to ServiceAI to kind of show some tangible approaches and how that looks and how you can kind of go about it. But really, again, we're focusing on how it all starts top to bottom. Now, if you are not familiar with ServiceAI, you're not super sure what you got yourself into, let me tell you. So ServiceAI is a tool in the CloudRadial family. CloudRadial has a bunch of different things that we offer for MSPs. Obviously, your client portal, if you're familiar, is our primary flagship. That's the one that's been around the longest. But ServiceAI is something that we've been really interested in, less so from the sheer like AI is cool angle, more so for what it allows our partners to do, which I think is really interesting. So we're still building, we've built it already. We're doing something that is really kind of shifting the conversation less so to like your PSA reporting on, like your types and subtypes and looking at spot checking technicians, which will cover all of this, to more conversational interfaces, trying to get insights and reporting that are trying to help MSPs basically meet clients' expectations, needs, and take the service desk and turn it from like a wild west of people doing things the way they want to kind of best practices. Again, without shoving AI down everybody's throats, which is a real weird and hard line to walk, but hopefully this makes sense how we do it. So looking at Service AI kind of outwards, it is pretty new to the family of the CloudRadial stuff. The idea in general, without me reading all the stuff on screen, is that more so than just here's an AI tool, now your stuff has AI, it's a tool that is going to first and foremost make you measure your readiness, your understanding of it, so you have a good concept of where you're at right now with your current data, which is super important because nothing more deadly and prone to failure than launching AI with no plan or no verification that it would work correctly using your data as context. So that's number one. Number two, and that's the majority of this webinar, is that encode area, which is how do you take human beings and synthesize them into something that is scalable using this cool new technology and obviously scaling it up from there. So taking that, testing it, improving upon it, iterating and doing it. That's what Service AI is built for. But more importantly, even more than that, that's kind of what we're seeing as a global trend for service desks trying to figure out how to use this cool technology to be better. So let's talk about the fundamental issue. which is variable tolerance, fundamentally, right? So what we see a lot of, because again, I'll pause for a personal anecdote, with CloudRadial UCP, right? I've been here at CloudRadial for it's coming on 7 years now, which is near the start of when it was even available. And when we started, especially for me, it was pre-COVID, right before COVID, and then obviously post-COVID, lots changed for MSPs and how they do business and stuff. Really, really different. Well, even this webinar, we called it enterprise scaling. Enterprise almost doesn't mean a certain size anymore. It's almost like how you operate the mentality. So kind of funny. I wrote this slide. I agree with it and I almost disagree with it because when we talk about tolerance at 10 people, I've seen organizations that operate with enterprise level precision and professionalism at 10 people. So it doesn't mean body count is necessarily the problem. Conversely, there is an actual problem that is met when you start to scale up to a larger count of people in your organization. So what are we talking about here? Well, when you have fewer people, right? 10 is an arbitrary number, but stick with me. 10 people or so is something that you can coach. If somebody's doing something out of line, it's really easy to spot when you have low numbers of technicians, right? We're talking about the service desk. It's easy to catch their mistakes and it's easy to kind of put people back in line. So why is that? Obviously, again, you probably have good visibility, you can coach them. You get bigger and bigger, and especially the MSPs that we work with that have teams, they have entire like divisions, whether it's specific people on boards or queues or teams, literally, whether it is just a lot of different contractors and then co-managed IT, like however you approach it, the squadron of people that you have and how they organize together to solve tickets and to assist clients is what we're talking about. So when I say 50 people, just imagine your own version of that. It could still be 10 people. I know it's kind of an abstract concept, but when you start to have this division of people, you have a lot of different labor working, you lose that power to check on them, to take a look at them, to basically snap people back into alignment with the service desk. Now, again, before we talk about all the crazy technical stuff, that matters a lot because what you're losing right off the bat is consistency in your service delivery. Meaning, not necessarily that your performance or your standard of work goes down, but you lose kind of whatever makes your business your business. It just becomes support. Some people may support your clients exactly the way that you want them, sticking to everything from how you want them to communicate to building relationships. Other people are technical wizards, so they can solve problems much faster, but they don't have that human touch. So you start to get that variance. So when we talk about inconsistent ticket handling, it sort of becomes harder and harder unless you have a really, really tight management thing to make sure you have that ticket resolution and that basically relationship management consistent. SLA is obviously different and difficult to account for when you have different levels of skill across different departments. And then when we say margin erosion compounding is talking about really who picks up the phone, who does it faster, how do they do it, do they have the tools available to resolve issues, whether they are super simple ones or they are very client specific ones. So it becomes more possible and more likely that when you have that variance and spread, you have some people are high margin technicians and some people are low margin technicians, right? So it's much more complicated than just 10 people is good, 50 people is bad. It depends on the structure of it. But that's something we should look at and understand reality. The reality is it's not really enough or easy enough to go to a PowerPoint and say, that's the problem, fix this number, make it like this, and we're good. It's about figuring out the consistency doesn't really scale through willpower or just like we want it to. So really, what are we talking about? Is this a people problem? Not really. Like it can be, but reality is it's a real systems problem. So really what happens is a lot of MSPs want to, for lack of a better term, I don't really mean this, but I can't think of anything else on the fly, blame techs or at least focus on them. But the reality is that if you give the same ticket to your top 5 people, unless you're really, really into it, you probably are going to get 5 slightly different approaches to that ticket, and they're probably going to be fine. But the issue is that there's no real reinforceable standard by a human hand. I mean, again, unless you've got people hovering over a service desk, you can't really enforce that standard. And the other bigger problem, I think, is that there's not really an easy way or a system says this is what this ticket should look like perfectly from the response to the etiquette to the length and the feedback that you get from the client. It's hard to standardize all that because a lot of it is based off subjective stuff talking to the individual clients. So let's focus on that. And that's kind of the start to this. So if we want enterprise level consistency in the service desk, the first thing is trying to understand the gap between those technicians, because that shows us what the average, the actual achievable average is, and then what we need to do to make people kind of get to that alignment. So it starts to get kind of difficult because you're taking a subjective approach to how to resolve and how to build relationships and trying to take this technology, AI, which is very rule-based, very technical, and try to meet them in the middle and keep that humanity while also keeping AI efficiency. So tall order, how do we go about that? Our answer to that in ServiceAI was an RPS value. So RPS for us is a, again, made up value. We did it ourselves, a relative performance score. Has multiple uses. And in this context, what we're really talking about is the objective ticket quality, not from the perspective of happiness or CSAT or RPS, NPS, or RPS for sure, not NPS, is really talking about how do we take a ticket and basically audit it on the fly and score it consistently that evaluates a ticket with the same standards that matter in relation to both how you're performing the service, right? Making sure the clients are happy and you have people answering consistently. But even more importantly for our purpose is AI readiness. So people that come to us and say, we want to do AI stuff, especially in the service desk, because it makes sense. That's a good place to start it, to have AI learn and to be able to assist in tickets. The first thing to do before you deploy it and say, go at it and let's do it is how ready are you to do it? Now, there's even, again, when I do implementations of Service AI, we have to have this discussion or at least set this mindset. There is the AI used for the service desk that is prevalent in conversations, which is like literally solving the ticket, right? We're talking about like opening up ChatGPT, throwing an image in there and saying, please help me work through this code. That's a type of AI for support. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about how to use AI for something that can take these different processes and standardize them. So this is like a credit score, right? It tells you exactly where the gaps are without having to go looking. When you have a low RPS, right? And this is a little bit more technical, but I really thought this webinar would be a good chance to explain how it works in the back end. There's actually a 0 to 100 score. We show 0 to 10, but this is to be precise, that basically takes a look at a ticket, analyzes it, and gives you a score on a scale of 1 to 10 in the UI, which we will look at in a moment, that tells you whether the ticket is basically unreliable and not very useful for scalability purposes, or it is a high RPS score that is telling you that that is a good format of a ticket, right? Again, we're not talking about whether this ticket is a perfect resolution. It is a good learning platform for AI systems both to ingest it and understand the situation and consequently take that information and then be able to serve it up to future technicians, which is going to start that standardization process. Now, it's pretty difficult to kind of visualize this again with PowerPoint slides, which is why I typically bounce back and forth to the actual product so you get an idea. But the key takeaway here is that measurement of your current data sets and how useful it is the primary thing you should do, regardless of whatever tool you're using or approach you have, because if you, again, launch into some standardization without measuring what your standard is or what you want your standard to be based around, it's going to be adding, an accelerator to noise, to garbage. So what do we do? Well, again, the idea was to try to find these performance gaps and understand like the mean, right, the average, without needing to scroll through a lot of tickets, especially when we get to, and again, I'll air quote enterprise. Enterprise deployments means that you have a ton of volume and it's not physically possible to spend time reviewing everything. So what I see, and this is based off actual anecdotal stuff that I've run into, is prior to AI, right? Before Service AI, before AI in general, what would happen for a lot of people is they would take their technician tickets and audit them randomly. I put 50 to 100 because that was an example I worked with a client for, but sometimes it would be 10 tickets, 5 tickets, end of the week, whatever. And sometimes you didn't have time to do this at all. So if you've never done this, don't feel like you've been missing out or I'm making it up. It's mostly because this is how people try to approach it. And the idea was that the service desk manager or somebody appointed to that would take a look at those tickets, understand how the approaches were going, and offer individual coaching on technicians to basically manually snap them back into alignment. All of this to try to get that service desk consistency. So you have this huge spend of labor in taking technicians, looking at their stuff, snapping them back to how your organization wants those tickets to be handled in the service desk, putting them back out there, and then repeating the process if they deviate from that norm, right? Which is obviously the same thing we're talking about, but it's very, very, very manually intensive. The other problem is there's not really a good way to prove improvements empirically because a lot of this is subjective. So RPS values are really supposed to be a matter of taking a look at AI's one of their best qualities, right, as a system is kind of this almost robotic objectivism where it takes a look at something and always can always measure it the same way for the same people without any bias. So the nice thing about that is that gives you an objective metric that you're going to be able to use to see patterns that you can't ordinarily catch, whether that's because you are subjectively doing it and you have a good day and maybe you're willing to let some stuff slip for tickets. You're having a bad day and you really want to nitpick. AI doesn't do that, right? So you want to be able to, again, visualize the stuff to really figure out how it's going. So this is the core fundamental basis of before you start to scale or do anything for the enterprise. Again, if you're really serious about trying to be as efficient as possible with your tickets, before we can get to technician assistance and building workflows, whatever, we have to understand how far we are from that. Now, let's take a look at the actual ServiceAI version of this. So I'll talk through it because, again, it's pretty difficult to understand just with slides. So as we stare at this, and if you've seen any other of my webinars, we go into this, but I really want to talk about specifically this guy. What's happening on screen right now is I have an organization. It's fictitious. This is one for me. I am the theoretical MSP called Azure Technology. And then what I've done is I've connected to my PSA system. It's injected tickets into ServiceAI and built a database around them. And then we are just slicing and dicing and analyzing the stuff. So even in my limited context, I have 327 tickets. I pulled up a secondary one, which I'll reference, a secondary tab, which I'll reference because I think it's much more interesting and realistic. Like this other tab has 31,000 tickets. So this is much more real as it pertains to a lot of you guys. Because what we're doing is we're, again, feeding the AI oodles and oodles and oodles of data. And what we're really looking at, especially with the ticket RPS, is again, we're taking a look at the information in those tickets, the interactions, the notes, the everything that that ticket has, and we're trying to offer you a score. Now, what do you do with this, right? The first thing, if you've never touched it, you don't know what's happening, is you get a gut feel for how usable your data is. So even in mine, a 6.3 of all-time data indicates that on average, right, if I put an AI in front of a customer trained on my data, 63% of the time, it should do a decent job. This is a very rough explanation, but the idea is there. So that's not super great. It means that 40% of the time, it's not going to outright miss, but it'll probably kind of have to either hallucinate or reach or do something to figure out how tickets are handled. So again, practically speaking, a ticket that has, very few notes and just is a very like, we did the thing, we're done, low RPS, a ticket that explains the process, high RPS. And the idea is that when we drive and look into an individual ticket, this is that objective thing I was talking about before. Let's look at maybe a specific one. We have so many tickets in here. Let's find one that's actually interesting. Here we go. So Outlook spam filter issue. Now, again, without having to do this, I do not expect or tell anybody that uses ServiceAI to do this individually, because this is what people typically do when they audit them manually themselves, right? So we are automatically taking a look at the ticket, looking at the base stuff, whatever. But again, specifically breaking down how feedable, how good of a fuel source it is for the AI, specifically with the Ticket RPS. We're not going to focus on this during this webinar because it doesn't really matter for scaling the service desk, but it does, but not my primary focus. But we're not really talking about the technician scoring or the user scoring. We're focused on the consumability to try to figure out the standard. So when you get an 8 or a 9 or even a 7, those are usually my golden scores because that means that your tickets are good fuel. So why is it good fuel? Well, you start to look at it and you can read the summary and whatnot of what really happened with the ticket, but that's not really what we're doing. We want to get in the mindset of what is the AI looking for to get me a good RPS for tickets, a good automation score. It's making sure that the conversation is trackable. Again, when I teach service AI stuff, when we implement, I scrub the AI part out. Like I know AI is great to talk about and theorize and it's cool, but the reality is like substituting all of this for a human is equivalent, right? So what I mean by that is if you put a human being on this conversation, just like me and all of you guys are, and we read through it, I'm not going to out loud every single one, would we be able to figure out what happened, what the issue was, what the resolution was, and then just like a human being, right? If Gina says, hey, I'm getting promotional emails and spam that I thought would be blocked, as human beings, we understand more or less the issue. Now, how we resolve that issue may result in us knowing tribally, right? You have the knowledge ahead of time to go check the spam filter, to go do stuff, whatever. You may Google it, so that may be an activity you do, but this tells you what you have to do. And then when Adrian comes back and as a technician says, let's do the spam filter settings, whatever, what's happening here for a human being, right? Forget AI, is we have pitched the problem, we have pitched the solution, we have verification or denial of that solution working, right? In a big ticket workflow. And then it's fixed. So Gina came back and says, hey, I set my spam filter to high. It did this, whatever. Pretty good. Now, Gina didn't come back in this one ticket and say, it worked, we're done, perfect. If she did, that probably would have bumped the ticket RPS higher. That's not always in your control, and we don't aim for 10 out of 10s. We're aiming for pretty good. So this is a type of ticket that what's happening technically, right? As a human being, I would read this and go, oh, good to know. Next time somebody puts in a ticket for their file spam, their rules, their email not coming through, I'll know to have them check this right now, down to the individual human. The individual humans, you guys may be super smart. You may literally remember the path, file options, trust center settings, blah, blah, blah. Or you may just generally remember it's in the Outlook settings. This is the core of the variance of technicians that I was talking about earlier. Technicians will approach this differently and be able to offer their assistance differently, which is going to result in a different client experience and a different set of resolution speed. If I say go to your settings and do your thing, cool. If I say go to file options, do this, or if I do it for you, those are three different approaches to the ticket that fundamentally do the same thing. This is very long-winded, but this is what is fueling that ticket RPS. So that ticket RPS is the AI analyzing this and asking itself and replying to you saying, I can use this. I have a good enough knowledge to use this. Now, you repeat that 327 times, that's okay. You repeat that 31,000 times, you've got an AI that is trained very well on all things that have happened in your system. So when we talk about RPS as a measurer, how that really applies for us at the top level is when I go back to that dashboard and I'll do my all-time data. This is saying that on average, the tickets that I have fed it are 6.3, useful out of 10, right? Which again, it's really a score of 100 on the back end, but whatever. So why does this matter? Well, again, this is your first indicator of, are you really feeding it good enough stuff that you could, right, eventually put an AI out there that is smart enough to answer and tweaking the tone and everything else to really scale the stuff. The reason you want to get this high is because before we get to that ultimate vision that a lot of MSPs have, which is to let people self-service, let people answer, talk to AI chatbots that are trained, that are cool and personable, and they have good stuff. This is the garbage in, garbage out, right? If it's a low score, the experience is going to be exponentially harder to get to because you've trained it on something that is not very good, right? Just like training a human being with crappy protocols, are they untrainable? No, but it's going to take a while to untrain them and then retrain them. So Ticket RPS, in a very long-winded way, is our way of showing you that first and foremost. The other thing that people use ServiceAI for a whole bunch is for technician assistance. So this is going to come up when we're talking about it shortly in my slides, but I'll stick to this and show you. When we run into issues like this Outlook spam filter, the other big benefit of ServiceAI is that it'll retain the fixes and then it'll be able to serve those back up to technicians via our sandbox, which we'll see later. Why that's important is because, especially for new techs or people that are like tier ones or whatever, obviously the future vision is to be able to outright just answer the question and help Gina get that answer in one way or another. But if in the meantime, in the present, when Adrian is our brand new tech and he's trying to answer a thing and he's seen this ticket maybe 6 months ago, but his human brain forgot, the AI won't, right? The AI will remember what happened last time, maybe down to the individual client, the individual user, and what worked, and be able to serve that up to him. And obviously, this is, again, all inside of ServiceAI. But whether that is in, we'll do a quick flash of the AI chat sandbox, right? Whether that is in here, where we specifically say, hey, here's what's going to happen, and the AI is assisting you. It's recalling things that a human being couldn't, right? A human being can't go through 31,000 tickets to try to get the answer, but the AI can in a fraction of a second and reserve that up saying, hey, last time you did this, this, and this. So there's a lot of different nuances here. And then the delivery mechanism of this is either inside of ServiceAI or even inside of your respective PSA if it supports it. But you can see how that ticket RPS really matters because the good scores feed it good stuff and make sure that your technicians have good instructions and they can stay more consistent. Bad scores leave the AI saying, I'm not sure, do your best. Either way, the answer to low RPS scores is to change your habits now or sooner than later. Because what's going to happen is you can have a terrible RPS score for your tickets, but that's based off of, again, trainability. So if you find yourself, regardless of you're doing this alone or you're doing this through Service AI, that you are not very impressed with the scores, you're not impressed by the output, the system is pretty well baked at this point in terms of AI recalling stuff. So if you have issues, that would be a good time to go back and say, maybe I don't want to feed it, years of data, which you can do to give it better context. Maybe you really want to feed it 3 months ago and going forward because we've changed our processes to become more adaptive to the service desk. So that's why this is so important. When you look at these, again, a human being doing that automatically or manually rather, super tedious. Look at the tickets, essentially mentally do your own mental RPS, figure out what you want to do, and then go talk to the people to get them to snap back to it. With an RPS value or something automated like that, not only do you have that auto capture of the score gauge, right, of literally how it's going, but that is going to help make sure that they're answering consistently going forward. So the good news for most people is that this is the start, the impetus of getting the entire service desk, enterprise service desk alignment, right? You probably already have your top performers, and they probably already have oodles and oodles and oodles of stuff inside of your ticketing system that you can just get. You don't need to go re-interviewing them or having them redocument their entire brain. It's there. Especially people who documents ticket well, people who categorize stuff nicely, people who resolve efficiency. You can basically focus on that data and not really, again, subjectively or anything. When you see the pattern, you're going to be able to encode it, which we're going to talk about in a second, which is taking those specific knowledges, training it up, and then teaching the AI how you want to get the best out of them. Or we're going to do that through chat rules. So basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to take our good individuals in the system, identify them, and shift them over to becoming a good platform. And those good individuals are going to basically automatically brain share to the rest of the team and build that service desk standard. So that's a lofty promise, but I will show you it's actually, technically speaking, pretty straightforward. So let's talk about chat rules and how those actually begin. So by itself, Service AI, despite its intelligence, can be kind of dumb because it just, again, has a wealth of knowledge, but it's not very good necessarily at spitting that back out. So when we talk about chat rules, what we're talking about is trying to take your knowledge and not make it sound like a generic chatbot, right? Where it just says like, hey, happy to help you. Let's do this, this, this. You're not necessarily trying to just turn on a language model and hoping it says the right thing. You are going to define exactly how your AI should behave. Globally, for each individual client, you can do it down to the individual users. So if you have client X that has some kind of a custom, SLA, they have better protocols, they have better, they get escalated links or whatever, you can tell the AI to keep that in mind and it'll assist the technicians doing that. If, user Y or whatever, right? A point of contact needs specific things because they hate AI and you really want to make sure their responses don't sound super canned, you can let them know that. That's all rule based. So it's really not necessarily prompt engineering, which gets thrown around a lot. It's like operational control. And again, technically speaking, it's very straightforward, meaning that like you take the responses that Service AI will give you, and we'll do a live one as an example, something super simple. Let's see, my MacBook won't turn on after the latest update. So again, we're going to kind of see this all go in action. It happens. I enter the prompt. It's going to scrape through the tickets, the articles, the precedent for it. Now, I don't think in my 327 ticket demo article I have much, but it talks to me, right? You can see that it spat out going, hey, it won't turn on, whatever. At this point, the difference between ChatGPT or Claude or whatever and Service AI is not that much, except Service AI is pre-trained on all of your users and tickets and your technicians and your preferences and whatnot, right? So this isn't just coming out of its butt and doing a cool web search. I mean, it can, but it's really pulling that in from related tickets and articles and whatnot. Now, we're talking about rules. So why does that matter? Well, again, if the idea is service desk consistency, I'm not necessarily telling you guys that you got to stick ChatGPT in your tickets because you can go to the site and do that. The reality is shaping how you want your technicians to really treat tickets and making sure that your scores, your brand is consistent relies on having this capability to serve up, right? And look at references and resources to fuel the answers. And then shaping them through, I'll go through my rules, right? Chat rules. So maybe I, as a brand, have something that I want to be warm and friendly. I want to crack jokes. I never want to crack jokes, whatever, right? I want to be able to talk to them. So maybe I want to ensure that I'm telling people that I want to change my process is to always say people are addressed by their first name because we're a warm company. We offer warm support. Stuff like this isn't necessarily going to be something that's going to make or break at the beginning. But what that does is it accounts for all that little variance that technicians do to try to get everybody kind of back on the same page. So again, in the past, a service desk manager might tap you on the shoulder. If you guys are service desk managers watching this, you may have done this, and you say, "Hey, you're doing pretty good. You're not, your bedside manner with these people is not very good, right? You're answering tickets, you're forgetting to do this, this, and this." What this does is when you compare the rules that you can put to shape the answers, it can remind them kind of what their answer should be. It's not some tool that is going to override, right? Human beings at the end of the day in service AI and hopefully for the near future always have the final say. So this is not some overriding thing, but this has ramifications of how you want your notes to look, right? Because that's going to be how service AI learns. So if you put these rules and you put nice standards, and like we saw in our chat sandbox, right? Don't mention ticket numbers, be warm and friendly or whatever. And we start looking at our history and we like this. And our technicians then start using these types of answers, or at least going back and saying, cool, now write that as a note for me or whatever, taking that and using it, you're creating a recursive loop where Service AI is now being fed suggestions that are edited by the human being. So I don't have a cool slide for this, but we like to think of it as the human beings in the middle. The AI is helping them through the process. It's giving them the answer. The human being can edit the answer. They paste the answer. The human being verifies that the human they're supporting likes it. And then once it's all good to go, Service AI tucks this knowledge back into its training and improves itself, right? Because it's given you the suggested solution, left you in the pilot seat. You call whether you like it or don't, and then you learn from it. So this is an accelerator. So first and foremost, it helps you understand where you start off with. And then as you keep doing this, it helps you improve the further answers. I mentioned before, so we have the chat rules, which are fairly straightforward, right? Be friendly, don't swear, make a joke, do whatever you want. When you get down to the nitty gritty, this is the other really very useful thing is you've got, again, technicians that are not only different variances in how they respond and how they work, but they're different variances even in how they approach the companies they support. You have technicians that are maybe very good or they're the darling of a certain organization. So like Able West Manufacturing may only work with Ricky and he's great. And they really don't like Todd. He's not a good guy. That's not true, but that's how they perceive it. Now, why is that? Who knows? But what a human being does, like myself, is I obviously in the best interest for my team, not necessarily for the AI. If I have additional things I want to drop, I can do that, right? I can actually give flavor and context saying, you know what? The reason I do so well with this company and other technicians seem to struggle is because I understand X, Y, and Z, right? Maybe they like to be talked to very, very concisely and no jokes, no fun, no whatever. That's fine. These are individual preferences. So being able to log these that are not as simple as just this ticket goes to this board or this gets this link. These are the more kind of ethereal fields are the other things that are going to help you scale that service desk. So preferences by company will end up shaping how the AI assists the technician, right? So when you start looking at it and going, well, Able Manufacturing, again, they want to be spoken to like pirates, right? So if I try that out, let's say, let's only speak to this company like a pirate. I have nothing against or for pirates. I just use this as a general rule to show you how it works. So say that was actually the secret to getting a great score with them and really making sure everybody does that. I'm out for the week or I quit, which happens a lot with technicians. They move on. If you've got that encoded knowledge that now is starting to be disseminated to the whole team, you can have that play out, right? So now I'm going to chat with them and I'm going to go, hey, as the theoretical user, right? How do I fix my MacBook that's not turning on? What I want to know is not how to do it necessarily, but all the stuff around it that makes my service desk exceptional. So I would like this thing to speak like a pirate very much because that's going to get me the best possible response. But I don't want that for anybody else. So it's not necessarily I'm up here telling you cool prompt tricks. It's really the scalability of the service desk doesn't just depend on who does good tickets or who puts in good notes, but it's also who lets you know the pitfalls, the red flags, the preferences, or whatever, and how do you scalably share that? Because that is the difference between something that is a passing whatever to a client that really feels like you get them, and it's harder and harder, right? The bigger the team gets, like we talked about at the beginning, the harder and harder it is to disseminate this information. You hire a new guy, your trainer's busy, they don't tell them about the pirate thing, they answer a ticket, the client goes, "What's the deal? You thought you guys talked to us like pirates for some reason," so on and so forth, right? So a lot of these chat rules are not necessarily to just do a cool gimmick. It's to talk about the potential of how do you disseminate that information to make it more scalable. And again, you can do that. I'm not going to do all the examples, but from the top level to the company level down to the individual user. So if I have these preferences and I want to make sure my clients are the best taken care of by my standards as an MSP, I have a mechanism to do that rather than tracking down or holding meetings or reminding people constantly because humans forget. AI usually doesn't, right? Because there's mechanisms to make it not forget. It's a very long way of saying it, but that is how you go from the analysis phase of where are we, how do we understand, how do we get better notes, to how do you start encoding better stuff. Well, you write better notes, you put in your preferential rules, how do you scale your best judgment, and so on. So here's the other huge part that is very important. I've said it a billion times, and I will say this on every Service AI or any AI webinar forever. Test, 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 test. Do not launch AI without looking at it. It will fail you every time. Not by a lot, sometimes by a lot, but usually it'll make you look like a fool and you won't even know. People inherently outside of the MSP space, a lot of MSPs don't like AI in the first place, and I get it. It's something that's basically being forced down our throat by every major tech vendor ever. But the reality is it's probably not going to go away, or at least not anytime soon, to the level where people think either it's a bubble pop or it's our overlord. The truth is boring. It's something in the middle. Why do I bring all this up? Because testing before it gets comes to clients is very important. A lot of clients, end users that we support, are in the same boat. Some of them are totally cool with it. Some of them really, really dislike it. Regardless, you want to be able to give them a really good polished experience. So Service AI specifically is a MSP service desk like locked system. You didn't see me showing you how Service AI is going to auto answer your tickets with AI responses and stuff. And if that comes, that'll be a while. We purposefully know that we want our human beings in control of what that final answer is, right? We can have it write notes and assist with recaps and all the other stuff, but we don't want that thing overriding just yet because what's a 6.3 RPS going to get me? It's going to get me, again, hallucinations, mistakes, old processes. You need to tighten that up before we get there. So, long story short, when you really think about the sandboxing element, you want to replay, test it out for yourself, see if it fits your standards with no surprises. Service delivery managers are typically the ones that are going to review the output, tweak rules, rerun stuff. We're not going to talk about it super well, really at all for this webinar, but we did a lot of webinars on documentation. So short of just ticket notes, if you want to really teach the AI in bulk and you have a lot of good processes and stuff that don't necessarily exist line by line inside of your ticket notes. Obviously, documentation is a fantastic fuel source. So these are the kind of things that help you pick it up and use it. And again, sandboxing it, whether you're seeing the responses of a ticket and you're using them religiously or you're just eyeballing them saying, we're not quite there yet. That's the point of Service AI, is to kind of run it as an active test. It's a real non-negotiable, especially for enterprise, because again, you want to make sure you look good. People are hearing about all these crazy AI advancements and they want to see that being used to the best ability. So long story short, again, when you're getting into the phase where you have it set up and you've trained it, okay, definitely defining the rules. Again, definitely replaying the tickets like we saw to make sure that the answers are satisfactory or at least good enough that you can tweak them. Validating output really comes down to, are there weird edge cases that require a little bit of a tweak or a little bit of a one-off rule here and there? And then going live, what that really means is you have a couple of different ways of going live with a client in Service AI. So number one is making sure that you basically tell your team internally, like, hey, really give this a shot and train with it and use it as a system that is reliable, as a kind of like a manager junior, but it's really more like an assistant. If any of you guys are Halo fans, it's like a Cortana, right? Where it's like sitting over your shoulder offering suggestions, but it doesn't override you or punish you if you don't do what it says. It's just sitting there. That's one version of going live. CloudRadial as a company, right, is focused on client experience as a whole. ServiceAI is more focused on MSP readiness with AI, and obviously there are some ramifications of it. One of the things that we're building, and we have already, is we have a chat bot, but we really wanted to be able to connect it to ServiceAI to give you the possibility to go live and put that in front of clients. So that's something we're building out. But what I've seen, frankly, between me and you guys, is that most people aren't ready for that. Even if that feature were available right now, the RPS scores are all over the place for MSPs because, again, fundamentally, we haven't seen the process of getting that data consumable for AI really happening yet. So I think that'll coincide. We have lots of MSPs that are doing this, that are building their processes and their rule sets and stuff. And the reason that's interesting is you can use it today for that internal review, no problem. You can take all the answers, but before we really let it out in front of clients, we really want to see key metrics hit, especially in relation to good RPS scores. So the AI has a really good model and you don't look foolish. So other important thing, encoding standards into AI behavior. Basically, chat rules are going to be the thing that are going to change the difference, right? We already talked about this a little bit, but for the most part, like that is my overarching thing is that is the difference between the bot that everybody hates versus the one that people say, this is pretty cool and useful. Now let's talk about the financials. So if there's anybody that likes to count the beans in here, let's talk about how that actually affects stuff. Well, I put a very, very conservative number here for a second on a level one hire. Obviously, there's very different types. The markets are all over the place, but for the most part, I'm going to come to a number of like 45, 50K US dollars is what people typically think of for a level one hire, right? A brand new person that doesn't do it. And even then, right, this has become more and more difficult to find these people because these jobs are largely not needed for a lot of stuff, but obviously some people have them. It's a whole thing. The point is, there's usually not only that initial cost, then there's the ramp up period, right? Learning all the individual processes and everything else. And then everything else is, can they take more tickets than the guy before them or the guy after them? And the answer is, it depends, right? If they're really good and they learn and they're naturally curious, that ramp time may be shorter. Maybe it's longer, hopefully not. And then what their speed is once they get there is pretty difficult to determine unless they've been doing it. And they will get faster over time. So it's not just can they answer the ticket, but can they answer it quicker? So when we look at this as a whole, the cost of the employee is what it is. The ramp time is kind of a little bit variable, but that's more or less what it is. And then their actual speed as they go through it is what it is. What we're saying here is we're saying if you have something that can take your previous knowledge and basically skip the part where they have to figure out what's going on or what document is the relevant one for this situation, or what I see every single technician does, especially the lower tier ones, is they will ask their team. They'll ask for assistance from their internal team. Not a bad thing. That's not necessarily a problem, but when it happens on every ticket, that slows your other team down. So you're having a thing here that's happening that is basically wasting time with stuff that is documented. It's not like these are actual cases that need people to ride along. Sometimes you do and have people assist and coach. We're talking about those instances where the answers are there. I just don't know where to find them. I'm new at your company. I don't know that you've got IT glue documents exactly telling me how to reset that server or whatever, right? So to be able to surface that and coach over here means that not only do you have a shorter ramp time, but you have something that basically allows you to do tickets a little bit faster too. We're not saying that these are going to be instant answered or whatever, because I've seen the complexity of the tickets you guys deal with. Some of them are, how do I reset my mouse? And other ones are nightmares, right? That take weeks to solve. Anything in between. So AI is not some magical tool, as far as I've seen, that can really resolve these. Some of the stuff that we've seen out there in the market can do automatic, provisioning or, setting up users or whatever. But there's a lot more complexities there. That means that the safer, more boring, less sexy marketing approach is to let people basically get the right resources and make that decision. So I can't necessarily kick off every automation that solves every single request, but I can at least bring all the resources and point the text in the best direction to resolve tickets faster, incrementally, and reliably. That's what we're talking about when we really say growing that capacity without doing the headcount, right? So we're saying, can we at least bring the resources to the tech to make them make the best decision without having to go crazy? And the answer is, yeah, you can do that today, definitely in Service AI as well. You saw me do a little bit. This is not a real, not trying to sell it, but that's in motion in practice, when I take a look at this, that's a lot of what we're seeing here, right? When we see the related documentation or the related tickets, to offer that option to let them go see it and to source the answer is super important and super cool. Now, next thing, it's super important for it. And we're almost done here, and I'll show one more cool thing, a little sneak peek of what we've been working on. So if you've seen one of these ServiceAI webinars before, you have not seen this because nobody has seen this yet. But this is super important. Treating AI as an infrastructure and not as a feature. What does that mean? It means that there is a weird maturity curve. And I get the irony and the disbelief of some vendor selling AI stuff telling you AI is important. I get that. That's difficult. But the reality is that, like, what I'm seeing is AI is akin to a calculator or whatever. It's not that it's going away and it's not going to solve your problems and do your taxes for you automatically, probably, maybe, unless you're really good at it. It's something that you want to basically understand how to approach, how to use scalably. So, what I've seen, what we have seen as an organization is MSPs start with AI loosely, right? As some kind of a chatbot feature, chatbot enhancer, something that they turn on and they hope will figure itself out or they can improve and whatever. But the mechanism that most people have in mind is some kind of a chat. Even in our system, you saw me showing that, right? That chat functionality is how the AI takes answers, however it does it, and spits them back out in some interface, chat. But the reality is that if you're really going to approach this from an enterprise standpoint, you're not thinking about this as a bolt on. You're thinking about it the same way as like an RMM or a PSA. It's an entire system that maintains other stuff. It's core infrastructure that does the governance stuff, right? It does controls, feedback loops, improvement, right? As a system. And it's not something you just rip out and put in. So it requires you to be a little bit more thoughtful of how you really want to approach it and what your goals are with it. The difference as well is you want to make sure that it has stuff like audit trails, like security. We did a whole webinar on security and how we know that technicians are solving tickets faster because whether by direct order or because it just makes their lives easier, they're using generic AI models to resolve tickets, which is not inherently bad, but they're also pasting a whole bunch of personal information into public models, or they're not really sure how that's governed in general. So there are all of these different questions to discuss, again, from an audit trail to logins to permissions to client-specific configurations, redactions of PII inside of your answers and your input into the models, right? So there's a lot of stuff in play here, and anything else is like a liability at scale, like wildfire. So it's very difficult for me as a vendor to come up here and say, do AI stuff, think about it and go ahead. There's a lot more complexities to think about. So really do your research on the models that people use, the governance they have, where your data is hosted. And there's a lot of those nitty-gritty, boring, but really important questions because the benefits are pretty obvious. How you get there and getting there in a way that doesn't make it a giant pain in the butt for you is also very, very important. So again, when I say treat it as an infrastructure, I mean really not just like a we'll run this experiment, whatever. If you get into it, expect it to take a while, expect it to be something that you really have to go behind and work with it, right? So one of the other things that we're working on, this is my sneak peek bit, and then I'll do my last little slides here, is how we have approached it. So the majority of this webinar is focused on the service desk and scalability. So with a really unofficial recap, RPS scores to tell you where you start, how things kind of work, where you can improve, better ticket notes with documentation, and so on and so forth. And what I have on screen with this chat is kind of the first output. It's the mechanism in which a technician can do better and get the answers faster, get the resources faster, and so on. What we didn't talk about, and this is something else that matters a lot, especially to enterprise organizations, is the visibility and data across all of the desk. So when we talk about this, we've talked about, again, really just the ticket RPS. We want to do stuff like, let's talk about AI training, right? So are those chats getting better? Is your fuel, are you feeding it? And do you actually see a marked improvement over time? And if so, how much? And what's your target? What's your goal? What do you want it to be at before you're ready for mass deployment or deployment to clients? So these are the questions that you're going to start getting rather than just we have a thing, it answers tickets nicely. Awesome. You need to be able to visualize the growth. And again, we have separate webinars. We've done so many webinars on Service AI. We talked about agent performance, so down to the technicians to does this technician need specific coaching, right? I always use my poor guy Tevin to talk about being able to visualize their specific note-taking ability, right? Their performance, their overall behavior on these tickets, right? Being able to analyze these is going to be a good way to analyze who does what and who is a good, like basically model to emulate, not only for AI, but for other employees. Now, the part that nobody's ever seen before, as far as I know, is that what we also had is we have a freehand, basically AI that can ask questions. So remember, at the beginning of the webinar, I was talking about where do we get all the ticket data? How do we learn from it? Well, we're getting it from one of the supported PSAs. We're building that up and we're asking it. Now, when we look at the agent reports, the technician reports, what I have on screen, or the tickets or the RPSs or whatever, what's really happening there is we built the database and we have the AI running on it, which means you have it looking at the individual technicians, how to score them, how to do the companies, right? All that stuff. But if you want to ask it questions that are not on screen, right? Is this technician, show me the 5 tickets that this technician did that didn't go so well. Well, again, you can scroll through and try to find them, or you could ask our Orion Assistant, and that Orion Assistant's job is to basically stick the context on whatever you're looking at. So as I have it open on the sidebar, this has been in Service AI, you can ask it whatever. So if I say, hey, how's this person's response time, or what ticket's the agent handling right now? It can go through and do that. Now, one of the things that we noticed is we built this to be contextual based on what's on the page. Meaning that if I do that for Tevin as a technician, fine. If I go to the Apex company here and I ask them, hey, what's this profile's about? Show me the company's recent activity. Anybody seem mad recently? Whatever. But when we really, really wanted to see what we wanted to build for the enterprise organizations and just in general, is we wanted people to be able to ask anything about the data like humans do, right? Which technician is the absolute best and why? And also, which company is causing me the most pain? And the way that we had architected this is a little bit too constricting with our current like system. So if I ask it right now, again, this is probably way too much for the webinar, but I still want to talk about it. If I ask it in the company context, which technician did the best, it's going to go, I don't know, I'm looking at the company. Let's focus on the company. So a little bit more flexibility. So what we did is we shifted this to its own sidebar. And now what I can do is I can ask it questions that are going to basically fetch the information that it needs, which means that when you have your 31,000 tickets loaded in, or however many you have, and you want to be able to say, all right, show me who's got the lowest this, who's got that, why do you think that? You can have full-on conversations that talk about it in play, which means that you can start to do really interesting things like who's the happiest user, who do they deal with the most, asking the AI to go through and draw these connections that are either outright impossible or giant pains in the butt to go find yourself in in your PSA search systems. So this is another major, major, major thing. It's not enough to just throw a dashboard and say you got a 6 for an answer and you did an 8 out of 10 for a technician response. To be able to ask it and say, hey, why? What's the difference between these people? Do you want to figure out those root causes and what are the most common tickets and start to attack these by really figuring out what makes these companies different from each other, starting to build even company profiles, right? We talked about this in a separate webinar, but enhancing this is another big thing for us to be able to say for this company, which one of their products caused the most noise. And this company doesn't have any tickets, so not very impressive. But in general, like what is plaguing them? That takes the service desk stuff and yes, everything we talked about and standardizing it applies, but really elevating it over to how you can take this for insights to everything from QBRs to more of like your account managers. It's going to add another dimension of value to how you look at the data. So the data is not just cool because you could put ChatGPT and answer tickets faster. The data is cool because you can start to share those insights with your customers and basically show them that the AI is not just a gimmick for you, it's how you're using this to analyze what moves the needle for their business, which is really, really important. So again, good data is very important, but also just the stuff that you're sitting on right now is also super important, right? That is going to be how it makes its decisions, how we report, very useful things. You just need something that can organize it. And that's, I think, AI's biggest forte. So I'll do my quickest pitch. Again, I mentioned that I prefer not to sell it as a bolt-on, just like, hey, try it out, it does it. Definitely, it's just something that lives inside of CloudRadial, inside of our ecosystem. You can get ServiceAI standalone. You don't need to have any of the other products, but our vision for it, because people ask me this all the time on the webinars, and they go, "Hey, my PSA has an AI assistant that does the ChatGPT, that does the triage. What's the difference between that and this?" Well, the difference again for us is to be able to take that holistically and tie that into freehand chat and tie the chat into your portal to be able to reference who's got the chat? Who are we talking to? What articles, what documentation, what endpoints they have available? And to have a share of data that's not just tickets, it's not just this, it's to be able to give them the right reports, show them the right dashboards from an interface that applies their preferences and rules. So it's much more complicated and much more intricate than just an AI chat box is online and we're done. It's learning the users, learning their problems, learning how you've dealt with it, learning who the best technician is, how to emulate them. So it's a really big learning thing that is the same thing a human does, just done at scale. So it's something that is all obviously included in it because you really can't do a good job in scaling up your service desk unless you account for all of these things. I'm not saying we're perfect either. There's certainly things that we need to do better at in service AI, especially as you saw, like there's tweaks to reporting and how it all fits in the workflow. But I think that these are the standards, especially starting with measuring, that you have to get into before you just drop an AI in there. That's it for me. So my three things that I keep coming back to is you see the gap, you analyze, you encode it, right? You fix it up, you change your standards, whatever, and then you scale it out. And that's going to be the best way to really approach enterprise AI, especially in regards to the service desk. You can always get a demo at radials.io/demo. All right, Crystal, I have what? How many minutes did I leave? 5? Whoa. If there are questions, please let me know. If not, we can end early because I kind of want to get some water.
Yeah, I don't see any questions. Oh, well, actually, one just popped in.
Shoot.
Thank you, Kyle, for that. Is there a chance for some sort of drift because Service AI learns from past tickets, but more and more of those tickets are its own and it's learning from itself? Could it start to drift off course?
Well, that's the thing. It's not spitting out the tickets because even the answers that it gives you never make its way into its ecosystem. So it's kind of true, right? Like if you look at this answer, it's not like this is getting pasted into your ConnectWise or Autotask or whatever. The technician is doing it. And at that point, what's really happening, this is where I rely on it because that's a good question. If you start an endless junk spiral, then you end up with an endless junk hallucination thing. So what we're really relying on, at least at this stage of service AI, is that a technician looks at this and is the one that goes, that's junk, that's not good, whatever. And there's a whole mechanism for saying whether this answer is good or not, but we rely on that technician to choose whether to use that answer and doctor it first. And that's what we learn off of. So there is a chance if your techs are just copy pasting and sending it off, that's no different than the AI doing it. But if they're actually editing it and making the good stuff, the idea is that it would be human checked always, we hope. What else you got? If you got anything else.
I think Kyle has another question.
Shoot.
How can we run this on our own data to see if we would get a good RPS and see if we're ready for your product?
You, well, actually, that's a good question. That may be a question for you, Crystal. What are we doing? Are we doing trials? Are we no longer doing trials? I can't remember. I think we may
Um,
not be.
I'm not certain, but I can check and Kyle, I will email you and let you know.
Yeah, because usually that's a good question, Kyle. Like the way that it has worked is that people set up a trial, and what they do is I get one of two reactions really. So they'll hook up the data and they'll be like, "Oh yikes," or they'll be like, "Well, it looks pretty good. And let's put this thing through its paces." If I get an "Oh yikes" out of someone, most of the time it's related to our back sync. So again, this is where I get into like more consulty, like what do you do? Because again, a lot of the context that it gets can be junk, especially if we pull in stuff. So that's something we always like to talk about. Going like, do you want to pull in 3 years of data, 4 years of data? If it's old processes or whatever, and you had bad technicians then or whatever, the scores are going to be abysmal. I'd rather have less but good data that does the good scores and then go from there. And then again, improvement can take a while, frankly, right? It can take weeks, sometimes months to get your RPS to the point where you feel like it is viable, and there's tricks to get it there, especially with documentation will clear that gap a lot because again, waiting for a ticket to come in and putting the perfect notes on this, contextual ticket is going to take forever, right? You can't write a good RPS on an Outlook ticket unless you get an Outlook ticket. Like, yeah, or you could just again document it and then all of a sudden because you have precedences, the response it's going to give you is going to be much better. But you have to make sure, regardless of how you test it, when you first pop up the numbers and you see your RPS, you have to make sure that your technicians are at least taking that into account and trying to emulate some of the responses because that typically will be what gets their RPS up because the system will literally tell you if you use this answer, I will be able to figure it out and the user will get a clearer picture. But again, I think it all starts with having access to it, whether it's in a trial or even the actual purchase of Service AI comes with what they call an ROR, like right of rescission, where they charge you and you basically buy it off the bat. But then after 60 days or 59, whatever, you just go, I don't like it, and then you just get your money back. So we do that a lot with people. We basically say you run a trial even after you buy it, really. One sip of water left in that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. We will let you know, Kyle, in the email and everybody else following up. But yeah, there is that 60-day money back guarantee as well. So
Yeah.
one last one here. It looks like is Service AI available through Pax8 or is it inside of one of the other CloudRadial products in Pax8?
It's a standalone product. I don't know if it's available in Pax8 actually. I don't think it is. I don't think we have a SKU for that. So when you go to buy it, I don't think it'll be available. You can buy it directly from us though.
Okay, I think that's all.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, again, I do these all the time. So whether you have a question that I didn't get to, or in general have a comment or anything else, demo is a good place because you can really hammer the hell out of the salespeople. Just be like, what about this? What about that? I recommend it. Or you can always throw questions to us. If you already use the Cloud Radio product, you can always hit up support and ask questions. They'll either route it to me or to my team, and we can get to it. Or if you are brand new, you just have questions in general, let us know. Again, we read even after the fact, we read the comments and chat and stuff when we follow up. So even if I don't get to your stuff at any point in any webinar, we're pretty good about following up about those. But okay, I
Yeah.
am going to end our webinar. I appreciate everybody showing up today and talking through Service AI and what it can do. And I hope to see you out there soon, especially as we keep improving this stuff and make it even more useful. But thank you guys. I'll catch you for the next one.